What narcissists do when they lose control over you. You know, we like to tell ourselves that evil is obvious, that it walks in, teeth bared, voice raised, chaos in tow. But that's not how it works. Real manipulation, it doesn't shout, it whispers. It cloaks itself in charm, in romance, in logic. It doesn't break the door down. It makes you unlock it. That's the terrifying part about narcissists. They don't just manipulate what you do. They corrupt what you know. They bend your perception until you're apologizing for things you didn't do, doubting what you saw with your own eyes, and justifying behavior that would have made your skin crawl a year ago. And people ask, why didn't they just leave? That's the wrong question. The better question is, how does a person realize they're being devoured when the pain feels like love? The tragedy here isn't just the abuse. It's that the victim often becomes complicit in their own erasure, trying to keep the peace, to understand, to save someone who never intended to be saved. But there's a line. There's always a line. And when that line is crossed, when a person finally says, enough, something happens, a shift, a fire, that's the moment the narcissist fears most. The one who walks away. Because that person, they're no longer food. They're no longer supply. They're dangerous, not to others, but to the lie. Let's talk about what leads up to that moment, and what happens after. Firstly, they are realization and awakening. You're in the ring before you know it. It doesn't start with rage, it starts with confusion. A missed call, a subtle jab, a weird look that lingers too long. You brush it off like fog on a windshield. But the fog thickens, and by the time you realize you're choking, you've already normalized the smog. That's how it begins, not with explosions, but erosion. The narcissist doesn't walk in screaming, they drip. They leak into your nervous system like ink in water. And it's subtle enough that you don't see the color changing. Until your reflection is a stranger. Your instincts, the biological inheritance of a million years of survival, scream, something is off. But you mute it, because they smiled, because they said you overreacted, because you didn't want to be rude, and so you accommodate, you explain, you bend. Until one day, you snap awake and realize you've been living in someone else's script, someone else's circus. And you're the one juggling knives blindfolded while they clap from the front row. Realization is brutal. It shatters illusion. But it also signals the return of the self, and once that starts, the narcissist knows they're losing the game. Secondly, gaslighting and confusion. They twist truth into fog. It's a strange thing, isn't it? To know something feels wrong, but still question whether it is wrong. That's gaslighting. And it's not some glitchy manipulative trick. It's psychological warfare. The narcissist doesn't argue with your ideas. They argue with your reality. They don't say you're incorrect. They say you're broken. You're too sensitive. You're imagining things. Why are you always so negative? It's not disagreement. It's distortion. And once they've done it long enough, you don't just question them. You question yourself. You rewrite your memories to accommodate their lies. You suppress your reactions so you don't provoke another subtle punishment. You slowly disconnect from your gut. And that is the death of discernment. The philosopher Descartes said, I think therefore I am. But gaslighting says, I think, and therefore I doubt. Doubt becomes the lens, and once that lens is fixed, the narcissist has you exactly where they want you. Disarmed, disoriented, and defenseless. And the most devastating part, you begin to internalize their accusations. You become the judge of your own integrity, and somehow, you always lose the case. So what do? You stop negotiating with distortion. You anchor yourself in evidence. You write things down. You trust your senses again, and when your instincts speak, you listen, because clarity, in the world of the narcissist, is rebellion. Third, the power of boundaries. No more chances, no more scripts. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's chaos dressed in hope. People, good people, often believe that mercy will change a monster, that if you just love them a little harder, a little longer, they'll awaken to their damage. But the narcissist doesn't awaken, they feed, and every extra chance you give them is not seen as grace. It's seen as weakness. You say, they didn't mean it. They say, good, I can do it again. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're moral architecture. They define what is sacred in you. They tell the world this space is mine, and you do not enter without honor. The narcissist will test them. Always. With charm. With silence. And every time you retreat they advance. Not because they're bold, but because they sense you haven't made a covenant with yourself yet. That's what boundaries are, a covenant. Between who you are and who you refuse to become. So draw the line. And if they cross it, don't warn them, leave. Because each time you forgive what should not be forgiven, You trade self-respect for fantasy, and fantasy always collects its debt, in confusion, in exhaustion, in a life that looks nothing like your own. Fourth, cold detachment, the narcissist's kryptonite. The narcissist doesn't fear anger. They expect it. They've trained for it. It gives them something to counter, to spin, to manipulate. What they can't handle is silence. Stillness. No reaction. Just that cold, terrifying void where their performance used to land. That's where their control dies. Not in confrontation, but in disengagement. Because once you stop reacting, they lose the script. They rely on your outrage, your tears, your explanations to feel important. And when you stop showing up to the performance, the theater collapses. This is what makes cold detachment so powerful. You don't yell. You don't justify. You simply walk. Emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. You exit the arena. And that exit, it's a threat. Not to their safety, but to their illusion. To be unbothered by their chaos is to hold a mirror up to their emptiness. And when they see their reflection without your emotional labor smoothing the cracks, they panic, they lash, they beg. And that, ironically, is how you know it's working. Nietzsche once said, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster." But cold detachment is not becoming a monster. It's refusing to wrestle one. It's stepping outside the narrative altogether. And that, paradoxically, is where your story finally begins. Fifth, manipulation reloaded, the return, the bait, the trap. They always come back, and they don't come empty-handed. No, they bring stories, crafted ones. The "I've changed" monologue, dressed in just enough sincerity to trigger your empathy. They mirror your pain. They echo your dreams. They say the words you begged to hear when it still mattered, but it's not reconciliation, it's strategy. The narcissist doesn't miss you. They miss access. They miss control. They miss the spotlight you shined on their dysfunction, the emotional buffet you served while starving yourself. And that's where many fall. The relapse disguised as restoration. You remember the good times, the rare laughter, the soft hands, the promise of something real, but memory, when unchecked, becomes mythology. You start to believe in a version of them that never existed. And that belief, that's the bait. They're not changed. They're rebranded. This isn't love, it's warfare dressed in romance. Because once they get what they want, the mask slips. Again, and this time it cuts deeper, because now you knew better. And still returned. So how do you break the cycle? You stop believing in their potential and start believing in their pattern. You study what they do, not what they say. And when that old knock comes late at night, you don't answer the door. Because the wolf is still a wolf, even if it's wearing yesterday's smile. Sixth, reclaiming the narrative. You are not a supporting role. There is nothing more dangerous than forgetting who you are. In the narcissist's world, you are not the main character. You are set design. You are dialogue filler. You are the one who makes them feel grand by shrinking yourself. And it's so subtle, so achingly subtle. At first, you just give a little more. Then you apologize a little more. Then, before you know it, you're editing yourself in real time just to avoid setting them off. You become background noise in your own life. But the moment you walk away, something strange happens. You hear yourself again. Not the filtered version. The raw, unedited, real voice that had been buried beneath years of mental editing. And you realize, you were never the problem. You were just cast in the wrong play. Healing means authorship. It means picking up the pen they once held and writing a different ending. Not a perfect one, but an honest one. This is not about revenge. It's not about rewriting the past. It's about reclaiming the present. Because you are not here to orbit around broken suns. You are not here to validate illusions. You are here to become, fully, fiercely, and without apology. And when that happens, when you stop auditioning for someone else's approval, you stop bleeding for their attention, you walk not to hurt them, but to honor yourself. And that is liberation. Seventh, survival is not submission. Sometimes walking away saves your life. This is where we stop talking theory and start telling the truth. Some narcissists don't just manipulate, they destroy. Some don't just gaslight, they erode. And the longer you stay, the more you disappear. Not metaphorically. Your health, your hope, your sense of meaning. Depleted, inch by inch. And so many stay. Because they're scared. Because they've been told that leaving is betrayal. That sacrifice is love. That survival is selfish. But let's be clear. Survival is sacred. If someone is twisting your mind, violating your body, or threatening your safety, leave. Don't wait for clarity. Don't wait for an apology that's never coming. Don't wait for a miracle. You are not obligated to die in someone else's storm, just to prove you're loyal. This isn't about being cold or cruel. It's about being alive. You don't reason with wolves. You don't negotiate with poison. You remove yourself from the table before they serve you up next. And if you need help, ask. There is no shame in reaching for a hand when your foundation is crumbling. In fact, that may be the most courageous act of all. There in the ancient texts there's a line, choose life, so that you and your descendants may live. Sometimes the most spiritual, the most moral, the most responsible thing you can do is walk, not in rage, but in sacred defiance. Because you finally understand. Your life matters. And that understanding, that's the beginning of everything. You don't heal by pretending it never happened. You heal by confronting it, fully, honestly, painfully, and then choosing to rise anyway. Walking away from a narcissist isn't just physical, it's spiritual. It's psychological warfare followed by existential clarity. You stop explaining. You stop performing. You stop bleeding for people who never once brought a bandage. And in that stillness, when the noise fades and the fog clears, you meet yourself again, raw, bruised, but alive. And if you stay there long enough, a new voice emerges, not the voice they tried to edit but your own. It says, "This is who I am. And this is who I refuse to be again." That voice. That's the beginning of freedom. And look, if this struck something in you, if you felt seen, heard, maybe even understood for the first time in a long while, don't stay quiet. Share your truth, speak up in the comments. Like the video. Subscribe if you haven't. And check out the others on this channel. You'll find more than content here. You'll find language for what your soul's been trying to say. Because you're not broken. You're just awakening, and it's time you walked away. For good.